it's Michelle from Scrap Secrets and welcome to this week's Sketch Sunday. This week's sketch comes to you from My Favorite Things. It is sketch 268. As always, I will have the link below in the more information section. And here is the card. Here's what it looks like. And stay tuned and I will show you exactly how I made it. So we're going to start off with a stamp set that I've never used before. It's called Perfect. It's a Pure Innocent stamp by My Favorite Things. And we're going to be using some Black Licorice Hybrid ink by My Favorite Things as well. And I'm going to be stamping onto a plain piece of pink cardstock. I'm going to use my new Fisker scissors to cut out a mask for this. We're going to be doing some inking on the background using some distress inks and stencils. So I wanted to cut the stencil out, or cut a mask out before we started so that I could color the image in later with the markers that you see off to the right hand side. So it takes me a little while to cut this out of the cardstock, but once I have it cut out, I'm going to be able to keep it. We're going to be putting some repositionable adhesive on the back of it so that I can reuse it for another project. So there's the mask. Now I'm going to be using the Zig two-way glue pen. And the way this works is just put the glue on the back of it and it'll be blue when you first put the glue on, but then eventually it will turn white and that makes it repositionable. So we're going to ink that exact same stamp up again on the background piece that we're going to color and to do the stencil with. So just place the image where I wanted it and stamped it down. Now there's a little bit of black ink that got in her hair that smudged a little bit, so I was able to actually wipe it off. I was trying to decide if I was going to restamp the image or not, but I didn't need to. Now that the glue has dried and it's become removable, I placed the mask over top of it, and then using a Heidi Swap stencil from this stencil set, it's a set of 2 stencils, I placed it over the background to where I wanted it to be. So it was almost equal at the top and the bottom with just a little bit of triangles on either side. And taped it down to my work surface with some washi tape. Now I am using a craft mat and to hold my stuff on my work surface. We're going to be using 2 colors of distress ink. It is Worn Lipstick and Picked Raspberry. And I like to use the mini ink blending tools. So first we started off with some Worn Lipstick and I just went over the background holding the stencil down into place. Now when I got to the masked part of it, I tried to go from the mask out. That way the ink wouldn't get underneath of it. If I went from the outside in, it could have easily pulled the mask up, but if you go from the mask out, it works a little bit better. So unfortunately my stencil was slipping a little bit, so I just kind of tried to put it back into place the best that I could. And using distress inks, it doesn't really matter if it's perfect. It came out close enough. So then I'm going to go in with the Picked Raspberry and finish it off. And the effect that I wanted to go for was to kind of blend it out towards the right hand side so it gets very, very light. So if you notice, I go over the right edges very lightly with the mini distress ink, or the mini ink blending tool. And now I'm going to peel up the mask. It was a little bit difficult. I probably stuck it on a little bit too soon. It wasn't fully removable, but it came off, and now I'm putting it back in with the stamp set so that I have it for future use. Now I used a pre-made card base in craft, and then I used the burlap background from My Favorite Things and inked it up with My Favorite Things ink in Razzleberry. I believe that was Razzleberry. Went a little fast. So what I decided to do is ink the stamp up, and then I'm going to put the card base on top of it and just rub my hands over top of it. Normally I put a piece of typing paper down over top of it, and so that I don't get any ink on the back of the card like I just did there from my fingers. Because if your finger slips off of the card base, you'll get ink on it. So it came out okay. So the neat thing about this is you can actually dip it back into the stamp because that background isn't really, it's a good pattern for something like that if you miss a spot. So I placed it down on top of it just to see what it was going to look like before I started to do the coloring. And I wanted to pick the sentiment. It says, "You are perfect." So I placed it on my block and then used the same My Favorite Things black hybrid ink to ink up the stamp. And on the sketch, this is the banner piece that goes along the image, so I just thought that the sentiment would look really nice there as a replacement for that banner image. When you create from a sketch, it doesn't have to be exactly the same way that the sketch is. So we're going to use Sunflower on her hair. These are Pro Markers. I got these from Joann's, I believe, when they were on clearance, and I really like them. I actually like them better than the Spectrum Noir markers that I have, and I tend to use these more often. Now we're going to use the Sig 2A Pure Pink marker, which is a dual-ended. It has a thicker tip and a thinner tip, so I'm using the thinner edge to color in her dress. I wanted it to be almost monochromatic card, so that it was basically just whites and pinks, except for her hair and a little bit of her shoes. So I'm just going over the outline. When I color in an image, I usually go on the outsides and outline the image first, and then I color it in. That way I know where the boundaries are. I find it easier to get nice clean lines when you do coloring like that, when you outline it first. We're gonna do her dress, and then I did the tops of her shoes. I left the soles blank because I'll show you what we do in a minute. So just coloring in her shoes so everything is pink. So I'm going to color in the cat that she's holding with the Ice Gray Pro Marker. And I colored in, and then later on I realized I forgot the cat's tail. We're going to be using that, I believe that was Vanilla Pro Marker, to color in the skin. Occasionally I will use that one and the other light color that I have, and we'll do skin tones with that if I decide to do shading, but I didn't really do much of it on this card. I wanted to kind of keep it simple. So I did her face, her arms, and her legs, and when I was doing her arms I realized that that's when I missed the cat's tail, so I went back in with the Ice Gray Pro Marker and colored in the tail. Now I'm going to be taking, and you can't really tell what that is, but that's a white Jelly Roll pen, and I wanted some texture to her dress. So I just went back in and created a bunch of little polka dots on it. Gives it a little bit of texture and dimension to a somewhat boring one-color dress. Instead of shading, if you're not really good at it, which I'm not, I think that this adds some character to the outfit, and it makes it look a little bit more like than you just colored it in. So I colored in her white socks as well. I could have left them alone, but I didn't. And here we're using the Wink of Stella black pen to do the bottoms of her shoes, so the soles. So it just gives it a little bit of black glitter. And then we're going to be using the white. I colored over the socks, and I think that was it. Yeah, just colored over the socks, just to give them a little bit of sparkle and shine. And then I went back in with my white Jelly Roll pen. There was a little bit of ink that got onto part of the white part. Then when I held it up to the craft cardstock, I realized I didn't really like the way the background looked, so I thought that I would try a white card base. So I re-inked the burlap stamp back up with the My Favorite Things Razzleberry ink, and this time you'll see I use the old card to put the backgrounds on it. So once that's done, I made sure that I went over all of the parts of the card so that the ink transfers all over to the front of it, and it pretty much did. I didn't really miss any spots with this one. It was a little bit better with the paper. So I used I think I used my ATG gun to tape it down to the bottom of this. So, and then placed it on the front of the card, and that was it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below.